All right, now on to the next passage, numbers 22 through 31. Again, when you read the blurb at the very top of this passage, it's going to tell you that this is adapted from J.D. Watson, F.H.C. Crick. It says genetical implications of the structure of basically DNA, if you don't know what that means. So this is the implications of the structure of DNA, and they kind of tell you kind of right in here. So they've deduced the structure of DNA using evidence from Rosalind Franklin and R.G. Gosling's X-ray diagrams of DNA and from Irwin's data on the base composition of DNA. So when you read this, again, it gives you an idea of what you're going to be talking about. So we are talking about, in general, the structure of DNA. So those are some of the things we're going to have to be paying attention to as we go along here. So here we go, starting with number 22. Again, we are just going to go in order. That's the first question. So the authors use the word backbone in lines 3 and 39 to indicate what. So we want to see what the word backbone represents in both of those sets of lines. So we're going to start with line 3, and then we're going to go on to line 39 and compare. So in line 3, it says, the molecule is a very long chain, the backbone of which consists of a regular alternation of sugar and phosphates groups. So the backbone of this chain is this regular alternation of these types of groups. So we have sugar and phosphate. So we see it there. Now we're going to go to the next line for 22. It says the phosphate sugar backbone. So they are talking about phosphate and sugar, again, of our model is completely regular. So it looks to me, as you're reading this, and again, as you pay attention here, we want to look for some sort of pattern between these two. And it looks like both is saying that it's a regular pattern of phosphates and sugars. So you're going to be looking for number 22 for a pattern of phosphate and sugar and see which one best matches that. So A says it indicates that it is, the authors use these words to indicate that only very long chains of DNA can be taken from an organism. It's not really saying that. It's a regular pattern of those two items. B says the main structure of a chain in a DNA molecule is composed of repeating units. That looks good, so I'll keep that because we have the repeating units like a regular pattern. A or C says a chain in a DNA molecule consists entirely of phosphate groups or of sugars. Now, this does have the phosphate groups and sugars. That's good, but it has this strong word, and we want to stay away from strong language. Again, I'll keep C, but I'm not really going to keep C. But because of that word entirely. Even though that's what they mentioned, it doesn't mean there couldn't be an exception somewhere down the line, which is C is saying there can't be. So D says a nitrogenous bases form the main structure unit of DNA. And again, is more about the repeating pattern of phosphates and sugars, which is not what that D is saying. So the best answer is going to be B for number 22. Moving on to 23, it says a student claims that nitrogenous bases pair randomly with one another. So we have a statement here that these bases pair randomly. Which of the following statements in the passage contradicts the student's claim, that goes against it? So I want to look at this evidence, and I'm going to see which answer choice says the opposite of the nitrogenous bases pair randomly. So we want to say something like what I'm going to be looking for is an answer that says they don't pair randomly. They have a very distinct pattern. So that's what I want to find when I look at my answer choices for number 23. So let's go ahead and check these. Starting with answer choice A, I'm looking for one where the nitrogenous bases have a distinct pattern. So to each sugar is attached a nitrogenous base, which can be 4 different types. So this one starts to say how like each one is attached. I don't see anything about a pattern here, so I wouldn't really keep that because it doesn't necessarily say it has a very distinct pattern. So I'm going to get rid of A and I'm going to move on to B. So far as is known, the sequence of bases along the chain is irregular. which means it's not regular. And again, I don't see him talking about necessarily nitrogenous bases, or that word isn't used, but it doesn't matter, because we have the word irregular, which we want to contradict the statement, not support it. So we're not going to pick that one. C says the bases are joined together in pairs, a single base from one chain being hydrogen bonded to a single base from the other. The important point is that the only certain pairs of bases will fit into the structure. And that actually isn't part of that. It doesn't look like, because it goes into the next line. So I have C, and then I also have D. Let's just compare the two. One member of a pair must be a purine and the other a pyrimidine in order to bridge between the two chains. I can't even talk right. So here what we have is this first answer choice, C, says the bases are joined together in pairs. So we have joined together in pairs. A single base from one chain being hydrogen bonded. So we got hydrogen bonded to a single base from the other. So this one talks about some sort of a pattern here. And then you have D. It says one member of a pair must be a purine and the other a pyridamine. So this is more, if you look, they're both kind of talking about some sort of pattern here. But if you notice, D is a little stronger. It says must. It has to be in this way for it to work. Whereas C, it's not as strong in its language. And we're trying to pick the best answer. The best answer is going to be, in this case, D, because it uses that stronger language. In this case, we're looking for something that says there is a pattern. And this one does a better job of showing that there must be a pattern, and this is what it's going to look like. So 23 is going to be D. And again, I probably would have been stuck between C and D on that one, but D's a little better. Number 24 says in the second paragraph, what do the authors claim to be a feature of biological interest? So we're looking for what is a feature of biological interest. So with that being said, we read that second paragraph focusing on that. What do they claim to be a feature of, again, biological interest? So this is going to be lines 12 through 19. So here we go. The first feature of our structure, which is of biological interest, is that it consists not of one chain, but of two. So right off the bat, I am seeing the biological interest is that you have two chains. These two chains are both coiled around a common fiber axis. It has often been assumed that since there was only one chain in the chemical formula, there would only be one in the structural unit. However, the density taken with the X-ray evidence suggests very strongly that there are two. So everything here is about having two chains. So I'm looking for something that says something about having two chains. So I'm going to check my answer choices. And it says, is it about the chemical formula DNA? Again, I'm focusing on the chains because that's really what the main idea of that paragraph was. So no, B is not talking about the chains. C is not talking about the chains. Even though X-ray evidence is used, that's not the main idea. D says DNA consisting of two chains. That is what 24 should be, because that's what that paragraph is about. So moving on to number 25. The author's main purpose of including the information about X-ray evidence and density is to what? Now this one, if you notice, the answer choice, this is a lead word question. We look the answer somewhere between lines 19 and line 29 because we got looking at the question before and the question after. So luckily we just read 24 and we read where they were talking about X-ray evidence. It was even mentioned in one of the answer choices, so we know it's right at the end of that previous question is where this one shows up. So the main purpose of including that information is to what? So that's really what we're trying to see. Why did they mention that? So as we got to the end, we are talking about it consisting of two chains. And they said right before we mentioned this sentence right here, the however, it has often been assumed that since there was only one chain, so assumed that since there was only one chain in the chemical formula, there would only be one in the structural unit. However, the density taken with the X-ray evidence suggests very strongly that there are two. So here we're saying, contrary to popular belief, there's that that belief is incorrect. So that's why this is kind of brought up. We're trying to provide some support here, and that's what this one's going to be doing for the statement made up above, where it seems like here this is the statement that was made. There are 2 chains, even though some people may think otherwise. In fact, there are. So that was kind of brought up just to kind of support that initial statement. So we want to see an answer choice that says something like that. So does it establish that DNA is the molecule that carries the genetic information? That's not really has anything to do with what we were talking about. Does it present an alternate hypothesis? I would say no, because that was already brought up as the original one at the beginning of that paragraph. C, does it provide support for the author's claim? I like the phrase provide support for the author's claim about the number of chains in a molecule of DNA. All the stuff seems to fit on C. I don't see a word that doesn't work there, so I kind of like that one. Does it confirm possibly the relationship between the density of DNA and the known chemical formula of DNA? If you really look at these two, notice D doesn't really seem to match, whereas C says it is providing support for the claim about the number of chains. All the information is there based on how that paragraph is structured and read, so 25 is going to be C. 26 says, based on the passage, the author's statement, if a pair consisted of 2 purines, for example, there would not be room for it, implies that a pair does what? So again, we have to read this question to make sure we understand it. So the author has this statement in lines 29 through 30. What is that trying to say? So what we need to do in this one is maybe get some context clues, because we need to kind of get an idea of what is the context that this sentence is being used in, and then based on those context clues we can kind of get an idea of what the answer choice may be. Now if you're not entirely sure where these answers may be going, you can kind of glance and see how the answers are being structured. Again, don't sit there and read all the answers and try to answer it right now, but it looks like they're talking about purines and pyridamines, and which one's larger, smaller, and things like that. So we're talking about larger, smaller, and things. So that kind of gives you an idea of what you're potentially looking for. But let's go ahead and read and see for ourselves. So again, we got lines 29 through 30. Saying if a pair consisted of 2 purines, there would not be room for it. So if you get your context, and again, I'm looking at this paragraph starting on line 20. And again, this is where they're talking about the chains. So we've already kind of read this. Again, the bases are joined together in pairs, a single base from one chain being hydrogen bonded to a single base from another. So we already read this part about that pattern and things like that. It does say the important point is that only certain pairs of bases will fit into the structure. So this is the setup that we have. So once we read that, it says one member of a pair must be purine and the other pyridamine in order to bridge between the 2 chains. So again, we have to make sure they can fit. And again, one member must be purine, the other pyridamine. And then they said if a pair consisted of 2 purines, there would not be room for it. So that means the purines, in this case, we're talking about which is larger, smaller. We've kind of glanced at the answers. Well, that must mean the purines have to be a little bit bigger, because if there's 2 of them, they would be too big, and that would make the pyrimidine smaller in this case. So I want to see the answer choice that would most closely match that relationship. So for 26, we're going to start checking these. It says of purines would be implies that a pair of purines would be larger. So right off the bat, I would at least maybe want to keep that, then the space between a sugar and a phosphate group. So this one I'm not too sure about because I don't remember reading about that, but at the very least this part sounds good. So maybe it's just an option, you keep it, but hopefully there's something better. It says this next one says implies that a pair of purines would be larger than a pair consisting of a purine and a pyridamine. Now this one sounds good because now the second half is also matching, so A is going to be ruled out. Next, C says implies that a pair of pyridamines would be larger. We know that's not true. And D says implies that a pair consisting of a purine and a pyridamine would be larger than a pair of pyridamines. Yes, in a way, D could be true, but again, the more so when they just say two purines wouldn't fit, they're really saying that those two purines would be bigger than a purine and pyridamine. So in this case, B is more closely related to what they're really trying to say in that paragraph. So in this case, B is going to be a better answer for number 26. Number 27 says the authors used the words exact, specific, and complement in lines 47 through 49. In the final paragraph, that functions mainly to what? So what's the purpose of using those specific words? So that's what we're going to be looking for on number 27. So reading really that final paragraph, honestly, I want to see what is the main idea of that final paragraph so I know why you would use words like exact and specific. So with that being said, let's go ahead and check these out. So starting at the very start of this paragraph, says the phosphate sugar backbone of our model is completely regular. So it's talking about that pattern again. We read that earlier. But any sequence of the pairs of bases can fit into the structure. So it follows that in a long molecule, many different permutations are possible. So we do have many different permutations are possible, many different possibilities. And it therefore seems likely that the precise sequence of a base the bases is a code which carries the genetical information. If the actual order of the bases on one of the paired chains were given, one could write down, so if an actual order was given, one could write down the exact order of the bases on the other one, so because of the specific pairing. Thus, one chain is, as it were, so one chain is the complement of the other, and it is this feature which suggests how the DNA might duplicate itself. So here they're talking about the pattern, and the pattern is so precise that we can actually duplicate this pattern, even though there are many different possibilities in the end. Because of the pattern, we can use that pattern to, it's such a strong pattern that even though there's so many different permutations, once you know the pattern, you are good to go. You can copy that chain. So that's kind of why it's mentioned there. They're using those words to kind of show how you can make that find that exact order, that specific pairing. They're kind of showing the strength of that pattern. So in this case, you look at the answer choices, see what closely matches that. It functions primarily to confirm that the nucleotide sequences are known for most molecules of DNA. Not really have anything to do with what we were talking about. Does it counter the claim that the sequences of bases along a chain can occur in any order? No, it doesn't do that at all. I'm just saying that it does have a specific order, so that's not going to be it either. Does it support the claim that the phosphate sugar backbone of the author's model is completely regular? Lisa's is talking about that phosphate sugar, the pattern, how it's completely regular. It's not necessarily talking about replicating or duplicating. So that's not mentioned, but at least it has part of that issue. So maybe if that's the best answer, you would pick it. D says emphasize how one chain of DNA may serve as a template to be copied during DNA replication. Now this one is kind of talking about that concept of replicating that DNA chain. And that's what that the main idea of that paragraph is actually about. So again, why are you using these words? To kind of show how you can use the pattern to duplicate that chain of DNA. So D is going to be your answer because that matches the main idea of the paragraph. So that's going to be number 27. Now 28 states, this is now we're on to the tables here. It says based on the table and passage, which choice gives the correct percentages of the purines in yeast DNA? So now again, I have to look at two things, the table and the passage. So we want to get the percentages. So we're looking at the percentages of the purines in the yeast DNA. Now when you look at the actual chart, we can go to yeast DNA, and here they don't really say what the purines are. We have these four things. So this is why they say the passage as well. We have to figure out when did they talk about what makes up purines. So here to find it, you have to have kind of pay attention where they mentioned it. It happened here in line 6 and 7. It says two of the possible bases adenine and guanine are purines. So these two are purines. So these are the ones we're going to use in our chart. So we're looking at adenine, which is 31.3%, and we're looking at guanine, which is 18.7%. So we're looking at those two numbers, 31.3 and 18.7. This, at least we can just kind of jump to the answer, is going to be C, because they're the only ones that actually match those two numbers. So that's going to be number 28. All right, and now number 29 says, do the data in the table support the author's proposed pairing of bases in DNA? So we have to talk the proposed pairing of bases in DNA. We have to know what the author says about that so we can figure out if the data in the table supports it or not, and then we can go to the yes, no, whatever. So the key on this one is figuring out the author's proposed pairing of bases in DNA. So obviously, having read the passage, it can help you figure this out. But one of the things they talk about where they mentioned all four of these organisms, these four are mentioned in this paragraph around line 31 through 39. And they talk about these things. They say, we believe that the bases will be present almost entirely in their most probable forms. If this is true, the conditions for forming hydrogen bonds are more restrictive, and the only pairs of bases possible are the following: adenine and thymine, and guanine and cytosine. So these two should be similar, is kind of what they're saying. So the thing is on this is does the chart support that? Does adenine and thymine are they similar? So when you look at these two, are these similar? Well, you look at each set of data, it looks like they are mostly similar. And if you look at the two ones in the middle, those two are also mostly similar as you're going through each one. So it does seem like it is matching. So it does support what the author states. So I'm going to get rid of D, C, and D. So now we got to get the reason. C says yes, because for each given organism, the percentage of adenine is closest to the percentage of thymine, and the percentage of guanine is closest to the percentage of cytosine. Those seem to be exactly what's happening in the chart, so I like that. And then where B says yes, because for each given organism, the percentage of adenine is closest to the percentage of guanine. And again, adenine and guanine, if you're looking up here, those are not the two that we're trying to compare. So it's not going to be that one. So your answer choice for number 29 is actually going to be A, because I had the proper statement. Number 30 says, according to the table, now we're just talking about the table on this one, which of the following pairs of base percentages in sea urchin DNA provides evidence in support of the answer to the previous question? So we want to look and see which two percentages, and again, the base percentage of sea urchin DNA provides support. So we want to see which two are going to be closest together, honestly, is what we're looking for. And we want to make sure the two that are closest together are the ones that are actually in the chart. So number 30, when we're looking at the sea urchin DNA, I'm looking right in here, and I'm thinking either the 32.8 and the 32.1 would help support that answer, or the 17.7 and the 17.3. They can't have both, so it's going to be one of those two. So here, it's not going to be obviously B or C, or D actually, so it's got to be the only two that are close together, which it had to be anyway, because we're not going to have two right answers there. So that's going to be answer choice A. So those two are the closest together, and we want to obviously make sure those are the actual numbers used in the chart, which they are. 17.7 and 17.3. So that's going to be the answer for number 30. And lastly, it says number 31, based on the table, so not the passage, but the table itself, is the percentage of adenine in each organism's DNA the same, or does it vary? And which statement made by the author is most consistent with that data? So we want to compare. Here we have it's the same or it varies. Well, the first part is easy to tell. Is the percentage of adenine in each organism's DNA the same? So let's look at the adenine and see what it says about that. So is it the same? Well, here what you can kind of see at this point is it's not the same. It's always different. It's something different each time. They're similar, but they said the same is kind of a strong answer. So we can say it's similar, but it's not necessarily the same. So because of that, I'm going to be looking, and even we have that one that E. coli is kind of big, kind of way off. You look at the 24.7 all the way up to the 33. Again, it varies, but it's not necessarily, you can't say it's the same. So it's not going to be A or B. So we want to get some consistent data, so let's see what C and D actually say. So we're going to look at 36 and 38. Again, this is for 31, so starting with 36 and 38, 36, 37, 38. Right in here it says adenine, for example, can occur in either chain, but when it does, its partner in the other chain must always be thymine. So here we look at adenine and thymine. They're trying to say that these are always going to be kind of paired together, which is somewhat true, but again, we want to kind of really focus on the statement where each organism's DNA varies. And that's really not answering that question. So that's why I wouldn't pick that as my answer. It's not focusing on it varying. So here I'm going to focus, look at the answer choice D. So that's 41 through 45. So here we says it follows that in a long molecule, many different permutations are possible, and it therefore seems likely that the precise sequence of bases is a code which carries the genetical information. So in this case, what we're trying to do is, again, see, does this answer the question? Well, again, it says based on the table, does each organism's DNA, does it vary? So we want to find a statement that's consistent with that data where it says that it varies. Well, this answer choice is literally saying that there's a ton of different permutations. So that means each different organism is going to have probably different percentages. It's going to vary. So it is actually saying the same thing in terms of saying there are many different permutations. They are saying there are many different percentages that you could have. So it will vary. So it is matching what it's saying there. So in this case, D is going to be a much stronger, better answer for number 31.